Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corkin here. I'm the co-host of this show. And if you haven't checked out any of our interviews in the archives, we've got some great interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies, ranging from we've interviewed co-founders or CEOs of Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard, and many more. And of course, this episode brought to you by EO San Francisco, which is the San Francisco chapter for Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global peer-to-peer network of more than 16,000 influential business owners with 200 chapters in 60 plus countries. And if you are the founder, co-founder, owner, or controlling shareholder of a company that generates over 7 figures a year in revenues and want to connect with other like-minded successful entrepreneurs, EO is for you. And you can learn all about what we do and take a test drive at eonetwork.org/San Francisco. And my guest here today is Adam Menconi. He's a newer member of the chapter. He's a broker owner of Prosper Real Estate, which is a technology-driven real estate brokerage located in the Sonoma County region, just north of San Francisco. And Adam and his 10-person team at Prosper Real Estate has helped over 350 families with, get this, $250 million in sales just in the last 2 years. They've done about $1 billion in transactions. They're one of the leaders, if not the leader, in Sonoma County. They have the highest number of transactions per team member in Sonoma County, and they've earned 5-star Zillow ratings on both Zillow and Google, 5-star ratings and everywhere you can see, basically. And it's an honor to have them here today. And Adam, we were talking beforehand about your background, and you, like many in the entrepreneurial world, got started in the world of Cutco Knives, which is a company that has a great training program. I've interviewed a number of people that have gone through that program.
Yeah.
And you have a kind of a amusing story about a time that early on you were you thought you had a great transaction working with this woman, about to sell her some knives. And tell us the story.
Yeah. So, the way Cutco works is you make an introduction, you sit down, and you're usually at the dining room table and talking, and you've got all the knives laid out kind of in front of you as you're kind of going through the script that you learn in your sales training. And in the middle of this whole presentation that I think is going pretty well, the husband literally knocks on the door and bursts in and screams, "Is this the guy?" And I'm 18 or 19 at the time. Oh. I looked a little older because I had longer hair and glasses. And I looked at him, I looked at her, I looked at him. And before I knew it, he was running after me, and I was running around the table to try to stay away from him.
And there's weapons on this.
And try to pack up the weapons that are in the middle of us. So that was my first.
Oh man,
that was my first fun in terms of like jumping into the entrepreneurship side of it.
And how did you like, aside from getting chased by wayward husbands? How did you like that kind of dog-eat-dog world of those kind of direct sales? Because it's not for everyone. It can be challenging, I imagine.
I felt it was one of those things. It's kind of like once you get that feeling of like you create your own future. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that same way. Like once you get that success where you did it and it was you and you made it happen, it's hard to go back to something else. It's like, I don't know. It's like a wolf that tastes blood. Like you are in that mindset now. You have to operate that way. And so from a pretty young age, I was pretty focused.
Yeah. Now you have an interesting background because you've been in real estate for 20 years, but you also were really interested in acting and theater, and you did extra work and went to college in Los Angeles and spent years kind of working up in that industry, which I spent some time working for DreamWorks in LA. My brother still works in reality TV, so I know a bit about it. It is speak of dog eat dog, talk about a tough industry. That is an extremely tough industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Still have a lot of friends down there doing stuff. And anytime I think my job is hard, I go down and I still will get enthralled because we can go on a lot with them or go behind the scenes or something. And I think it's great. And he looks at me, he's like, "I've completely lost my love for movies." And I'm like, "What?" And it's just because that industry is rough for sure.
It's a very tough industry. Yeah.
He's a cog in the machine is what they would say.
Right, right. And it's so difficult, especially from an acting standpoint, going out on these different auditions.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Big-
One of your early entrepreneurial endeavors was you and a business partner ended up opening about 7 different Quiznos sub locations. Quiznos, for
yeah.
those who don't know, kind of like a Subway. I loved it. They had great sandwiches, so I'm really bummed that it didn't work out. But talk
Yeah.
me through that. How are you? Is this at the same time you're going on acting gigs and you're also
No,
opening subs, or is this a different period in time?
this was a different period of time. I had pretty much given up on that. I'd come back, graduated from college, was up here up north, and we brought Quiznos from where I went in West Covina and brought it back up here and thought it could be something really great. And so we went from never being a manager or never being an operator before to being, at that point, I think it was 23, and we got up to 90 employees. And, you open a store and people look at you, you've hired them, and you're like, okay, let's do this. But you have no idea what you're doing, none
Mm,
whatsoever. And so that was horrible and probably the best boot camp for learning business on the fly. I've never worked harder in my life than working behind the scenes on those. And because I looked, at that point, they make you wear a hat. So when I wear a hat, my ears would stick out and I looked like I was 13.
mm,
And so I'd have, these people come in and scream at you because something was wrong or their sandwich was too wrong, for some reason. And it was so humbling to be a part of that and to kind of learn that it was really not about ego. Because in my 20s, I thought it was very much about ego. And I kind of had to stomp that out of me, I'd say.
yeah.
It did.
And so what ends up happening with all those locations? Do you end up selling them off one at a time, or were they
Yeah,
profitable? They each profitable, and that's how you ended up opening multiple of them?
I'd say 4 were extremely profitable. 1 was pretty profitable. 2 were stinkers.
Mm,
And they were 2 deals that were ego driven, that they gave us the option. If they said, look, if you want to open these, great. Otherwise, we're going to have somebody else open them. And at the time, we made the decision based on ego instead of the data. We talked about it. The data said no. I didn't want to do it. I conceded.
mm,
And that was probably the last time I stopped listening to my gut, because it cost us a lot of money.
mm.
So,
And so the other ones that were profitable, though, you end up selling them off.
correct. Sold
Yeah.
those, went into development. I'd never built a house before, but I was like, how hard can it be?
Before we get into that, though, what happened with the chain? Because it was an up and coming
Yeah.
chain for many years, and was that hard? Being like I guess you were a franchisee or something like
Yeah.
that. What was that? What was that dynamic like?
The dynamic, it's kind of like you're an entrepreneur, but you're not really. You get to run your store. You get to do the things that you like. I enjoyed making sandwiches. My first job was 15 in a deli. I loved it. So I got that, but I didn't get the ability to sit there and like make my own sandwich and call it the Adam Special. It's the same reason you don't go to McDonald's and order something special. It's like, no, you came there for a quarter pounder of cheese. Like that's what you get.
Mhm.
And so with Quiznos, I didn't get any artistic sense. I didn't get any fulfillment from being able to do anything there. And ultimately, like you learn a good amount on the work ethic side, but at the end of the day, when they were taking their chunk of money at the end of the day before any of your other bills got paid, you started realizing like, you know what? There's a lot of other ways that I could be making money if I'm putting this amount of effort and hustle in. And so that's why we bailed on it.
And so you end up going into real estate development.
Yep. So started building houses, started figuring that out. I lost $15,000 on day 1 because I didn't understand how to read the blueprints correctly,
Mm.
and started digging with the excavator in the wrong area. So you
Oof.
learn very quickly in real estate, and I learned a ton. And then we ended up going ahead and doing quite a bit, but then pulling out right at the end of '05 and sold everything between me and an investor.
And that
solar
ended up being
business.
about 2 years before the whole big real estate downturn. So was there something that some indicator that you felt like this market was overheated? Why did you pull out then?
Yeah. So I think for my background, which was I did have the degree in business and marketing and stuff. So microeconomics and understanding kind of the trends. We all look at the data, but the trends is really what I was looking at, or the wind. The stuff that doesn't have the data itself, but what is it telling me? And in this area, especially some of the areas we were investing, we were starting to feel some softening, and so I had invested in basically four corners of an area. So when some of these corners started feeling it, we immediately collapsed the portfolio because the majority of our investments were in the middle. So I had enough time to get those out, and it worked. We didn't. I think there was the one deal that we lost, and it was a 36, 37 unit subdivision, and we canceled. And I think I was 25 at the time, 25 or 24, somewhere there. And my investor, we canceled right after the hard money deposit, maybe a week, 2 weeks after. And we both lost $10,000. And I figured he'd be like, I'm a kid. He's not going to let me lose the 10 grand. But I cleared out my account. My account at the time had like $10,265. And I gave him the check for 10,000, which was my side of it. He goes, this is the cheapest real estate lesson you will ever have. He said, trust me. And he was right.
Because you could tell the timing wasn't right or the project wasn't right.
We would have lost millions. And since that time, the subdivision still has never been built. So
wow.
So, yeah, it was the right one.
And so you ended up, so 07, 08, this time period, you're working in real estate, and you have a story about a time that you're kind of helping with some of the short sales and some of the foreclosures that are happening, and you had experiences of like getting chased down the street by people.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
It was just a brutal time. It was a brutal time for everybody. But if you were in the real estate side, you went from making this much money to then making, like, it's not even on the screen. It's so far down. And in order to survive, you work for the banks. You work REOs, real estate owned, the foreclosures, or you start negotiating short sales like we talked about. And in that time, you have properties that have gone back to the bank. I've walked into properties where they've taken cement and poured it down the toilets. They've scalped every possible appliance, anything of value. They take razor blades to the carpets. You've heard it all, like the horror stories of all that. But I've been chased. I've been shot at.
Shot at.
Yeah, there's just all sorts of crazy. Not in Sonoma County because they had me go out of the area for that, but the level of crazy that was happening at that time in history.
It's weird because we're in a weird macroeconomic time now, but I was working for a real estate firm at the time doing short sales and advising, real estate owners and stuff like that. And it was a weird, awful, desperate time where people were running out of money and they were salvaging any money they could get anywhere. So as you said, like just pulling resources out of homes and selling them for whatever they could get it for.
100%. It was just a really dark time, I think, in the real estate world. And I was fortunate enough, I learned from, some pretty savvy people when I got started in real estate. And so I was able to put together a good chunk of money, and we started acquiring apartments during that time. So from 2008 to 2012, started acquiring quite a bit. And at the time, we had a hypothesis that it would be fine and these rents would come up and this is what it looks like. And fortunately, we were able to make a pretty smart bet on that, and that ended up doing quite well for us. So,
yeah. Now, you start your Prosper Real Estate around 2014. So that was about 9 years ago now. There's been a ton of change in the industry and the way that you market listings in that time period. But talk to me about the early days. I love to hear about that, the struggles in the early days of the business. What kind of struggles did you experience?
Well, I think, so I've been doing it a total of 20 is how long I've been licensed. And like in the beginning, we talk about it like before social media, before before everyone had a supercomputer in their hand at all moments, things were very different. And you had kind of this old school mentality that ruled. And now you've got this entire new way and this new palette to be able to get to people, to be able to educate people, create value, which is why I think the industry as a whole has changed so much in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And I mean, one of those big changes is I remember it used to be that you didn't even have access to listings. You had to go through an agent who would email you listings, or before that would take you around. And now the consumer, the buyer, or the seller for that matter, has got access to all these different resources. And Zillow's had a dramatic impact on the industry. I interviewed the co-founder of Redfin a while back, who was kind of talking about how that's affected everything. So what is it like now? How has those different social media impacts, YouTube, things like that, affected the industry?
I think before, just like you mentioned, we as agents, we held everything. And so they had to come to a broker. They had to come to an agent. Now they don't need to. You're dealing with the most, I'd say, educated buyers and sellers in the history of real estate. They have access to data that they've never had in the history of real estate. So now they do. So in order to actually be relevant and more than a door opener, you have to understand financial planning, tax implications, construction, all these other things that maybe they're not thinking about. You have to be a local market expert. You have to bring value to every certain component that they're interested in. You have to have every vendor imaginable, because if they're moving from the Bay Area up here, they know nobody. So you have to take what has traditionally been a sales model and you have to just spike it in every direction. So you have all these other roles that you then take on to kind of concierge the entire process for people. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then you're like the single agent over here trying to juggle 10 flamethrowers at the same time, because you're the marketing guy, you're the sales guy, you're everything. And that's pretty difficult these days.
And how have you approached it differently? We were talking beforehand, and you said that your acting class, of all the different classes you took, is probably the most valuable for you as a business owner now. You've got this background in theater and performance, understanding of the entertainment industry and the way that it operates. How's that shaped and guided the decisions you've made as you've grown your firm?
It's a great question. I think the hard part with this industry is, if you look at HGTV, if you look at a lot of the guys out there, they're going to have you believe that this industry is about showing off. It's about, getting out of the Mercedes in slow motion as it's panning around, giving you the Jerry Bruckheimer view of everything that you've built. And that may work in certain areas. In our area, that doesn't work. And it's knowing your audience. And our audience doesn't care about that. Our audience cares about value. They don't care what what is it? They don't care what you know until they know that you care. That is very much our focus, is like, how can we bring the value, relate to someone, be empathetic, and be more of, we call it real estate therapy. A lot of people need real estate therapy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're talking about what they want, but all of a sudden
what they want out of life, what they want out of their existence, right? Yeah.
Well, they may sit there and we talk with a couple, and the couple's sitting there and they may think they're going the same direction because they're buying a property, but really the wife wants a farm property and the husband wants a townhouse. So yes, they're going the same directions, and it's us trying to figure out how to get them on the same path so they are not literally at a T, because that's really where they're at. They're at a T. They're moving opposite directions. They just don't see it yet.
Right.
So,
well, as long as that husband doesn't end up chasing you around the dining room table, then I think that's a pretty good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing that struck me, because my wife and I bought a house last year, the way that the industry has changed compared to previous purchases we've done is everything has become so much more front loaded from all the preparation that goes in beforehand. It used to be, I don't know if this is just in my area, Marin County, but you get this huge packet of disclosures, whereas you used to just get that after you put in the offer and get the offer accepted. Now everything, so that as a result, the real estate agent needs to coordinate all these different inspections and stuff before it even gets on the market. Not to even mention also beautiful, photography and staging and all that kind of stuff. So talk about that change. Like there's a lot of work that goes into these
Yeah.
listings on the front end.
It used to be very much like you said, you would go and you would just put it on the market, throw some pictures. I mean, I remember back when people would, the first iPhones come out and they're like, this is great. Who needs a photographer? And it's like, you do. You need a photographer.
Yeah, right.
But now it is so much, I would say very, very different where on the listing side, and that's mostly what I deal with, and the team and I will go back and forth on the buyer side, but you front load everything now. You do your home, you do your pest, you're going to do your septic, you're going to do your well. In some cases, you're doing roof. In some cases, you're doing asbestos or sewer lateral inspections, and you're packaging everything up. And then you're you're taking all that information, you're sitting down with the seller and you're saying, if a buyer's going to look at this, is there anything that is a red flag issue that would prohibit them from wanting to jump into the game here and offer on this property? And then we have vendors that come in and either complete the repair or price it out at numbers that we know so people can quantify. So John, if you're looking and you're not in construction, then if you see that there's a problem with, say, the HVAC system, you're immediately going to go, wow, that's $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
And we go, no, but here's a bid for $4,200 and he can come by on Thursday and repair the whole thing. So it's quantifying that. And then it's also giving the ability for all the buyers to come in and they're all bidding on the same thing. So there's no ambiguity, and it also takes away their ability to come back and have that secondary negotiation.
I'm actually curious about that because so many other markets have moved to, kind of like the eBay model where you can have multiple different bids. But real estate is this one industry, residential real estate, where it's like one shot and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm curious why it chooses to operate that way versus wouldn't it make sense to go back to the 9 other people who had lower offers and say, well, there's a higher offer. Do you care to adjust your bid?
Sometimes people will. And we just had one that just happened like that. But I would say in this case, there was 4 offers and the distance between them was quite extreme. And so usually you're trying to go from 4 to 1 to figure out who's going to win. And if somebody's not in then
it doesn't make sense to go back.
You're just going to take this low one and you're going to toss it. And then you're going to focus on the 3 up here and then try to play ball because you can do that. You can go back and forth, but in a market where the sellers have more leverage because of a lack of inventory, you also can deal with buyer fatigue where you go and you literally, it's like scraping every little piece of meat off the bone. Well, what happens is you beat the hell out of them. The buyers finally accept the offer, but they're so irritated with the spirit of the transaction and they don't feel like their story is winning. They feel like you got all the leverage. It doesn't feel good for me. And at the end of the day, that's what you're selling is you're selling this story of like, this is perfect. This is going to be like, you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving here. This is where your family's going to meet for the next decade. Like that's what you're selling.
Yeah.
And so if you kill the story, they'll win and then they'll bail at the last minute. And then you as the agent have to start all over because you push too hard.
That's an interesting lesson. What has it been like for you building this team? I was an English major.
Yeah.
You mentioned you studied theater in undergrad. Not something that I was taught back then. You, of course, had other experiences, entrepreneurial endeavors like the Quiznos chain and stuff like that. So you had others that you had led. But what's it been like for you leading this team, especially now in 2023, as we've entered this very different kind of real estate environment with interest rates going up?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing I love about real estate is it's always changing. The thing I hate about real estate is it's always changing. And it's just the nature of things that you have to pivot, just like every entrepreneur out there. You're going to get hit with something and if you get hit the wall, you can go, most people are going to stop. You have to train yourself. You're either jumping over, going to the side, digging under, blasting through, taking a rocket launcher to it, whatever it is, you have to figure it out because no one's going to come in and help you. And in this market, we're doing the same thing where we're learning to pivot. We're doing all sorts of different things as the market adapts and changes. And I think it's still going to change even more in the next 15 months while interest rates are where they're at. Going more top of funnel, creating marketing ideas to continue to advise, educate, and consult with clients at a greater level rather than sell them anything. Like I said, I don't think anybody needs a better salesman. They do need a better advisor. So that's our focus right now.
Yeah, that's great. Adam, this has been a lot of fun. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, and check out some of your listings in beautiful Sonoma County?
Yeah, we're over at www.winecountryhome.net. You can find us online at Prosper Moves up in Sonoma County. I'll have my information attached to it. But yeah.
And I know I don't think you have anything that you can announce yet, but I know you spent some time yesterday doing some filming. So
yeah,
some of your film background there for a new show that you're working on.
Yeah, we're always looking on different content, creating different marketing channels to appeal to different people. And so we've always got either new marketing or new business ventures that we're kind of toying with on the backside of real estate, technology, investing, cash flow, all the other fun stuff. And so we have a lot of fun with it. And that's the great part about having a team is there's a bunch of guys here that sit there and tell me, Adam, that's a stupid idea. Or, okay, maybe let's do that. So it's great.
That's great. Adam, thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.